Hello, listeners. Thank you for joining me on 21st Century Native Leaders. My name is Peter Desmond III, and I am here with Sean McCabe. Sean is a professional accountant and was recently appointed to lead the Department of Economic Development for the Navajo Nation. Thanks for joining me, Sean.
Thank you, sir, for having me.
Absolutely. So, tell me about yourself, your tribal affiliation, and where you come from.
So first where I come from, my two clans are Ashin and Shle and Touching Basishchin. And my families are from my dad's side of the family. Eldon McCabe is from Wind Rock, Fort Defiance area. And my grandfather Maurice was part of the council for a while back in the early 70s. And my grandmother, Catherine McCabe, was a school nurse there at Wind Rock for a long time. And then my father was an attorney in the area, Eldon. And then my uncle Henry was the GM for the Pittsburgh mine. And then my Aunt Carol's down in Phoenix, who used a long career with IHS. My mom's side of the family, Dr. Malvina McCabe, my mom's a physician at UNM. And she's part of the Pablos down there at Yambuto with my grandfather Alfred and my grandmother Ada Pablo. So that's where pretty much I'm from. I personally am here in Albuquerque. I've pretty much been here all my life. And went to school at Fort Lewis College, high school at Albuquerque Academy, and then up to Fort Lewis College. Got my degree in accounting and came back here and started working, man. I've been here pretty much ever since. So
Nice. We have that in common. We both went to Fort Lewis.
yeah, it's great, man. I love that.
So I see on Facebook, did you play basketball for Fort Lewis?
Yeah, I played for, man, I was part of that Albuquerque Academy team that won 6 straight state titles. I was part of the first 3. I started on the first 3 years of to be gay. And then I went on to play ball for a couple of years at Fort Lewis, and man, my grades weren't doing so well, so I decided I better. And I knew I probably wasn't going to the NBA anytime soon, so I decided to start getting focused on my grades. And came out of it with an accounting degree. So.
Man, that sounds exactly like me. I played football at Fort Lewis.
Nice.
For the first 2 years, and then was put on academic suspension. Just got caught up in college life and traveling with football. But then I ended up, I stopped playing football and worked in Durango for a while and finished a degree in accounting too.
Well, one of the same, man.
Absolutely. So it's so funny. I look at your posts and I'm like, man, that's exactly what I did too. Except I switched careers though. I was an accountant for a year and then I ended up switching to education.
Cool. Yeah.
But I still do accounting. My wife and I have a little business, a consulting business that we run.
Thanks.
So it's pretty cool though. So what are the highlights of your career so far?
Man, I definitely have to say, being an entrepreneur, as you know, it's a hard thing to do, but it's rewarding. It's like being a parent, man. It's one of the hardest jobs you'll ever have, but it's at the end of the day, it's one of the most rewarding. Just the small victories, and being a native entrepreneur in a professional field like being a CPA is a great thing for me, and I love doing it, man. I've been on a lot of boards and stuff too, helping people. I was part of the first gaming board there at Navajo, and I was with DDC for a while. Now with NHA, and just being able to help, man. Going back and help your people when you can. And that's another highlight, I would have to say. But you win awards and stuff, but that's really not a big deal to me. It's more being able to fulfill, a lifelong kind of commitment to, wanting to get back and help your people in whatever way you can. So I love that I have that opportunity.
That's true, and and I say this again, similar. And I missed you at the meeting a couple weeks ago, but I'm also on the NAPI board, and I think that's the power of getting educated is using the education you received and helping the people out, and it's absolutely powerful. So, talk with me a little bit more about maybe the biggest struggle you overcame with being an entrepreneur.
I focus my practice and my career on working with Native people and working with Native tribes, and that I don't think people realize how hard that really is sometimes. It's like I said, it's something it's very rewarding. And when you get a contract with a tribe or your own tribe, and you do good work, and you leave them better off than they were, that's very rewarding. But sometimes that can be really, really hard, man. I think one of the biggest struggles that I've had is just learning how to navigate, the Indian politics side of it, and really just try to be a professional that Indian country can count on, and count as, just as good, if not better than, non-native entrepreneurs in my field. And, that's hard to do. And pushing and moving the dial on that in Indian country as far as Indian business goes is a challenge. And, but again, man, when it happens, it's awful to do something like this.
That's true. So, do you think it's easier to run a business off the reservation?
Oh man, that's a good question. I bet a lot of people probably say, it's just the same outside the reservation as well. But man, I don't know. I mean, I think that's a good point. I think either anywhere you go, you have to run into those types of situations when you're an entrepreneur, and it can be a struggle. I think on any level. I just speak from my own experience, which is with Native tribes. But I think you're right, and that's a good point to make. That it's probably just as hard working in any kind of any situation really in business, where you can get into some of the politics involved with that too.
Right. And the only reason I asked that is because as I was growing up, my dad had started various businesses, construction companies. We used to build hogans. We used to do a lot of construction growing up, and it just seemed there was a lot of red tape. I mean, just to get 8A certified and stuff like that. In fact, I believe a lot of the contracts that he ended up getting were off the reservation, like in Nevada and Arizona, building roads and dams, just because of the red tape with the BIA. Can you talk with us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think one of the things I've learned over 20 years, and not necessarily in accounting, but certainly working with tribes and consulting roles, and that is Native America and the way the laws are set up, and the BIA, and even some of internal tribal laws and regulations. It seems like we kind of put ourselves behind the 8 ball a lot of times. And I'm learning this especially with Navajo housing, man. I mean, I know there's a lot of scrutiny with Navajo housing. And, I went into that board position with the same skepticism as everybody else has, as far as, everyone's there, there's problems, people are stealing, basically I wanted to walk in there and just start building houses, because that was really part of what's really going on with NHA. But when I started learning, man, how much red tape is behind just putting houses on the ground and figuring out the land and all of the 164 process and trying to get that land approved for housing development, and then, getting people to even live in those houses. I mean, I think another thing people don't understand is, we build them and a lot of them are vacant. And this is just NHA as an example, but certainly I think in all business areas, now that I'm with DED and I'm learning that process as well now, and just learning how hard it can be to get the business site lease and the capital. A lot of businesses stop at the capital part. When you're a native business, you want to open a business right there on your own reservation. There's not a whole lot of access to capital when it comes to native country and how that works. And I know CDFIs are being set up and other points, but at the end of the day, the bottom line is, and I think the general point I'm trying to make is, there's so many different laws that will either hold up progress and sometimes just downright stop it. And I think those are where, when you really look at the infrastructure of Indian country, you need to start, we all need to start looking, especially at Navajo, where those laws are and where we need to make improvements for efficiency, and really start getting things to a point where, Navajo business, Navajo housing and whatnot can really start itself and run itself at some level. But I agree with you, and how so much red tape is there that it either makes it so frustrating you want to quit, or it just makes it impossible to even do some things sometimes.
That's true. And I feel that's the government side. So taking a look at it from the business side, like if living off the reservation, I can go to the bank and get a loan. I have that actual asset. I can leverage a loan, or I can leverage a house. But I feel like that's something that we don't have access to on the reservation. I remember my dad distinctly talking about that. He said that when you don't own the property, there's a challenge there, because banks want equity, banks want actual asset that you have. How do you think we can get over that challenge?
Well, that's a hard one, man, because like you said, when banks and any investors really, I mean, it doesn't necessarily need to be banks, but when investors come and want to start businesses in certain areas, they look at obviously areas where they can make money. And there's a lot of opportunity for that in Navajo and other tribes. But you're right, trying to build wealth or equity on a native reservation, it's almost impossible. And the reason is the land. You can never own land as a business owner on a tribe. You can just merely lease it. And so a lot of people over the history and course of time have found wealth in land development and land investment. And that's just a hard thing to do in Indian country when, by law, you just can never own that land. And so, you can build equity in land improvements and, your own balance sheet, if you will. But the real wealth in a business a lot of times will fall in the land that is owned and, the capital assets that are put on that land. And without the ability to actually own that and then market it and hold it as an asset, or like you said, leverage it to get loans and whatnot, it's a hard thing to do in Indian country. I think there's workarounds, but certainly it's something that we on the outside of the res you can enjoy, on the inside you can't. Like you said, here in Albuquerque, there's lots across the street from my house for sale. I could walk into a bank right now and say, look, I want to purchase that lot, and should I have the right profile, equity and debt profile, I could walk out of there in 2 weeks with land that I own. And that's impossible in Navajo or anywhere really in the Indian country. And I think that's definitely a hurdle.
Absolutely. And I think, I read the book. I'm not too sure if you heard of it. It's called The Color of Law. It's about the urban housing and how the government intentionally prevented minority people from having access to loans to buy houses, because in the book it was saying that um, Anglo people create wealth by owning a house. They leverage that to put their children through college. They leverage owning a house and that mortgage, or the equity that they build when paying on a mortgage, to open businesses. And I think that's what we don't have access to as Native people. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, the business, the biggest investment most people make in their lives is their home. That's usually the biggest piece, the biggest loan they'll ever hold in a mortgage, and the biggest asset that they'll ever own that they can, like you said, borrow against or use for business development. And pretty much in Indian country, that's been taken away by the mere fact that you can't own the land. You can own the improvements on top of the land, but those improvements will do nothing but depreciate over time. And in outside of the res, there's a lot of opportunities for land and investments on that land to appreciate based on businesses surrounding it. But in Indian country, you could surround land with all kinds of different business opportunities, but the value of that land will never go anywhere, and it wouldn't matter anyway because you couldn't sell it or own it. So you're absolutely right. I think when it comes to the Native American consumer or entrepreneur, the ability to build wealth on your own land is very, very difficult, if not impossible.
Absolutely. So take it back to you being an entrepreneur. How did you overcome the fear of failing, be successful as an entrepreneur?
That's a good question too. I've spoken to people at the res events and NIGA, and I've spoken to entrepreneurs. I've spoken to students at Duke University, at Dartmouth, UNM, Fort Lewis, and I've always told them, you know, there's when you're about to do something great, when you're about to step off that cliff, if you will, that don't worry when you do, because there's a fine line between falling and flying. And while it might feel like you're falling, you might actually be flying. And so I think the fear in entrepreneurship is that first step. If you take that first step, you'll find that everything else behind it, yeah, there's definitely things to worry about. How am I going to generate revenue? But it's making that first step decision is the very, very hardest one to make. And, overcoming that, the advice I would give anybody is, at the end of the day, if you work hard, you arrange things right, and you're honest to yourself about exactly what it is you can accomplish, and the capital, not only money capital, but the capital you have inside yourself, meaning the drive and your professional capital, meaning your experience and your education. If you have all of that and you work hard, you're gonna be fine. But I know that's a hard step to take at the very beginning. And one of the keys is being very, very honest with yourself about what you think you can accomplish and how you're going to get there, and the assets that you have to get there, both monetarily assets and assets that you have, like I said, with your education and experience.
That's amazing. In fact, someone once told me that, you know what, whatever you decide to do, if you can do it for the passion, like you just enjoy doing it without getting paid, right? You'll eventually start to make money off of your passion. Am I correct?
Right. No, it's funny, man. I don't think it's funny you say that, because I don't think I love accounting. I mean, I love, there's a certain level of it that I do enjoy. I think the aspect of what I do that I love the most is I love being a coach. And so when I'm on a board, or I have a client that needs to go out and analyze financial statements so they can find loans for, building a new whatever they're trying to do. Essentially, all I'm doing, man, is I'm taking a bunch of numbers, I'm interpreting it for them, and then I'm coaching them on how to handle it. I think it's the coaching aspect of what I do that I love the most, and I think that's the passion that I have that keeps me going. It's not necessarily the numbers, and frankly, it's not necessarily the pay. I mean, everyone's got to make a living. I just think there's a simple joy in coaching people in the right direction and then watching them succeed on their own after that. And I've been able to find that in accounting somehow, which is really weird, but somehow it works out that way.
It's so interesting you say that, because honestly, professionally, after switching careers and working my way up from the beginning, I'm a high school principal, and that's all I do. I coach teachers, I coach kids. In fact, I adjunct at the college here at San Juan College in accounting, and I feel that's what I do. I coach people to understand how to use accounting and how it's going to impact their lives. But I think that's the important concept about it. So, talk with me about common mistakes entrepreneurs make when starting a business.
I'll say hands down, man, the most common one I see, and probably the most dangerous one, again, is you're not being quite honest with yourself. And I say that because I think a lot of people have great ideas. Trust me, there's 100 million great ideas out there. But it's those people who are honest on how they're going to achieve that idea, and honest with themselves about how much risk they can take that achieve making idea into a great business. And I've seen too many failures in business in the first, say, 6 to 18 months of inception, because they just weren't quite honest with themselves. For example, how much is it going to pay for me to market this? How much is it going to take for me to really get the brand out there that I need to get out there? How much is it going to, of my own time and capital, is it going to take for me to, bring this product or service to market? And I say that because it's funny, man. I got a chance to go up and be a judge for the Shark Tank up at, well, they call it the Hawk Tank up at Fort Lewis. And it's like a Shark Tank for business students. And I heard some great ideas, man. There was a Navajo lady who had this soap company. And I'm thinking to myself, man, if she could get that soap into the Navajo spas, at the casinos and the native, that could work because it was all natural ingredients. I thought, man, she's got a great product. There was another girl who had this way of drying food for hikers and a method of doing it so that it produced more dried food. And she had a method of doing it. And I actually told her, you may want to forget about the patent or the business and go look into the patent. You may have a patent. That's where the money's at.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if she ever did or not. But anyway, my point behind that is great ideas, but then they would turn over their pro forma. And I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, man, you got $2,000 a year for marketing. I'm going to tell you right now, if you really want this to do something, you're going to blow through $2,000 in the first 3 weeks. So it's stuff like that when I say be honest with yourself about, hey, maybe you need a professional to help you do that. But I think as long as you upfront tell yourself it's going to cost a lot more, and then do I have the capacity and the time to do that, and you're passionate about it, I think you'll do fine. If you're not quite frankly honest with yourself about the time it takes or the money that it might take, that's where I see a lot of failures happen. Either they just get too frustrated or the risk is too high and they just quit.
That's so true. I like that. I like the way you stated that. This interview is brought to you by NavajoStore.com, an online store for Navajo products. Visit NavajoStore.com and order your clan coffee mug, clan travel mug, or clan license plate. Visit NavajoStore.com. You can also find us on Facebook at NavajoStore.com. NAVOSTORE.com. So, do you think there's a shortcut to success?
No, man, I don't. I mean, I really don't. I mean, guys like you, guys who go out there and make differences in business and people's lives, you know, and I know that it takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of sacrifice, time away from your family, which is really the hardest thing that I have to do is just spending time for my family. The rest of it's, like you said, when you enjoy what you do, it's really not work, but really the sacrifices I'm making is just being away from my family. But, man, that's what you have to do. And the biggest ingredient to success is hard work and also failure. That's the other piece I don't think people, it's funny when I help people budget, whether it be a school or a business, and people always want to budget for success. Oh, well, let's budget for a 10% increase over last year. Let's cut expenses by 15% this year, which will be 5% to the bottom line. And people have no problem defining success. But what I think a lot of businesses don't do, and they should do, is turn around and define failure. And if they had a really good understanding about what failure might look like, I think they'd be a lot better in developing ways on how not to achieve the failure that they've identified. Because I see a lot of people in the coaching that I do in consulting and trying to take shortcuts like that because they've easily defined success and saying, oh, if we just do this and do this, we'll get to this number. And 9 times out of 10, this or this or this, one of those fails and they'll never get to that number. But they've never considered, well, what does that failure look like? And I've gone through this actually with the MB3 Foundation, and not monetarily, but Nota's vision on that has always been to move the needle on diabetes and obesity with the kids. And that's a hard thing to measure. And it was interesting. We just had a board meeting, and our executive director was like, I don't know if we're actually doing what our mission says. It's hard for us to get that data. And I turned around and said, but look at what we are doing. Maybe we're not moving the overall needle, or we can't prove we're moving the overall needle on diabetes and obesity in kids. But look what you are doing. You've got kids in programs that would otherwise not get any exercise now in soccer programs. You got them in cross-country programs. And if anything that the science teaches us is habits like that and teaching good habits and eating habits will eventually move that needle. So we have to be able not to define success in that situation as, oh, we've moved the needle or we haven't. Well, we can't prove we've ever moved that needle, so people say we failed. Actually, no, we haven't. We haven't failed. We've succeeded in getting otherwise children that don't do anything out doing stuff. So to me, by defining that failure, by saying, well, no, we haven't moved the needle, but in failing to do that, we've actually had some successes by getting these kids out doing something. To me, we're reaching a goal at that point. And I think a lot of businesses don't actually think about, or governments for that matter, think about failure. What does it mean for us to fail, and how do we keep ourselves from doing it?
Right, and I tell you, I'm actually a part of a program right now out of Stanford, and it's called Hacking the System. And I think that's one of the biggest things that they talk about is, you can fail a million times, but the most successful people that are, that we see in society, they're the people that have failed the most.
Oh, yeah.
Because from the failures where you learn to do it the right way. Am I correct?
Absolutely, man. I think the number one ingredient to success is failure. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've failed and tripped up and, pissed off a client or maybe done something, that wasn't quite to the client's liking. But you learn from it, man. And that's the key is taking that kind of failure and learn from it and make it better in the future. I mean, if you can take failures and learn from them, you've got a recipe for success.
Absolutely. It's powerful. So this is a little bit more towards leadership now. Do you think you were born a leader, or did you learn to become a leader?
It might be a little bit of both. I certainly think there's certain characteristics that, kids may show early on that they have a leadership ability. But I think certainly there is if not learning it as you go forward, you're refining your leadership abilities. I think, when it comes to leadership, there's a lot of differences between, leadership and like dictatorship or even politicians, if you will. And a leader, if you're a true leader, you're able to get people to buy into something and then make it their own belief system as well. And those people are hard and rare to find. When you're really able to get people to buy into something and believe in it. And I definitely think that there's a refinement to that over the course of someone's career. But I also do believe there are people who are kind of born that way. And I can give you some examples from like even my own CPA firm where, we hired an accountant, for example. They were a great accountant. They could get in, service a client, get in under budget. But the minute you put them in a supervisory role, they turn around and start not doing so well. And the fact of the matter is they just never were maybe in that position to be in a leadership where they can lead a team. They're just better off crunching the numbers and sitting behind the desk and making sure the client's happy. And so I do believe there's pieces of it that maybe you're either born with or it's just kind of part of your personality. But those that have it, I think it's a never-ending process of learning and failing and refining your leadership.
Right. I like that.
Yeah, I think it's both.
Yeah, I like what you said, because I feel like you talk about building capacity within your staff, and also about developing capacity and developing your people. So I think that's pretty powerful. So what does the future look like for Native people?
Man, I think I really think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic, especially at Navajo. I think I'm kind of in that tweener position, if you will, where I'm not quite one of the old guys yet, but I'm definitely not one of the young pups. But I see a lot of people coming up, a lot of leadership, a lot of people who really want the best for our people and our nation, and guys like you and who are serving on these boards. I see some people who are coming up behind me in the CPA world that I think we have a lot to look forward to, and I think if we do it right, man, we really foster this talent and embrace it instead of keep pushing it out toward the outside the res. I think the all reservations across the country, but especially Navajo, man. Even in the current, there's a lot of people that I work with now that are really talented people, man. I mean, there's some smart people at Navajo, and those are the types of assets that we really need to hang on to. And whatever your political views might be, or your opinion of the current council or the current administration, I really do think there's some really good people working in both offices and branches, and the justice branch, and just to give you an example, like NHA board. Our chair, Chris Beach, is a young guy. He's just going through law school now, and that guy's he's a smart guy. And Dareth Watchman Moore, and Frank Lee, guys that I really didn't know who they were, but they're I think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic. And I think one of the best things we could do for ourselves is really recognizing, identifying that talent, and cultivating it, and embracing it, and bringing it back home. Because there's a lot of great things happening out there with the younger people.
That's so powerful. And I think that's the power. And, I always hear people talk about Navajos, looking at it as from a deficit point of view. But I like the way you talked about there's a lot of potential for growth from cultivating what we already have. That's amazing. So let's take this in another direction. So what do Navajos need to do to be prosperous?
Well, man, I think just from strictly business standpoint, one of the things, and I know, given the time frame that I may be in or not with the Division of Economic Development, one of my goals is, and one of the things that I really think needs to become a priority with Navajo is we really need to start embracing this small business development initiative that I think has been kind of swept under the rug at some level for many, many years. And I think there have been attempts to fix it, like the NBOA. I'm just not sure it's doing what it should. And I had a meeting with my staff a couple of weeks ago, and I told them, look, I recognize business development and I recognize economic development, and there's a difference. And I said, there's a lot of tribes, especially outside of Navajo, can develop a great business. For example, you take a Southern California tribe, they put up a Vegas-sized casino that draws from San Diego and LA, and they got 80 tribal members, and each one of those tribal members is getting $20,000 a month of per cap distribution. That's a great business. They started a great business. They've made a lot of money off of it, but they haven't really developed an economy. And at the end of the day, the people who are still getting rich off that casino aren't the people who own it. It's the people who, provide the slot machines. It's the people that built the whole thing, the whole casino itself. And I think the day that Navajo can recognize the potential that if we could have a Navajo slot machine company and a Navajo bank and a Navajo construction company that can handle a project like that on its own land, that's when economies start to grow. And when you provide that type of job and that type of consistency in business, that's when you find these communities starting to grow and starting to develop themselves, really. But there's a lot of things in there that play into that: housing issues, infrastructure issues, obviously, and really just the people staying home and being able to develop that. But that is definitely a goal of mine, is really to start embracing that small business aspect of the Navajo Nation. Give our people a reason to come back and work for us and open a business. I mean, right now, there's just not many reasons for guys like you and guys like me to go and put my CPA firm in the middle of Winter Rock. I'd love to do it. I think I could get more business that way, but there's not a reason for me to do it. There's no housing. There's housing issues. There's education issues out there. But that is something that I think we need to really start embracing and building that. And then where I was going with the Southern California example is that just simply doesn't work on Navajo. Even if the Navajo government decided to write a $100 check just to the 160,000 people that live on the res, Navajo would have to go find $160 million in net income somewhere. and it just doesn't exist. That just does not exist anywhere. And so the get rich quick efforts that may have worked in Southern California will never work for Navajo. Navajo is going to have to figure out how to develop that economies of scale, even become a national or international power in being able to dictate markets like the energy markets. I think there's a lot of potential for renewable energy sources and even some of the old energy sources that if Navajo plays its cards right with water issues and uranium and renewable energies, it could become a national or international market, a mover in that market. And it's that type of stuff I think that really needs to be thought about. And then the secondary businesses that can spin off of that could be native owned, that's when you develop economies and communities.
Right. So I tell you what, you said something in there. I remember my dad working on this. So my dad was pushing for the Navajo Nation to get into wind energy.
Yeah.
But he said council didn't want to do it. So do you see sometimes does council hinder our progress?
I think maybe back when that happened, and I certainly will say, to answer your question, I will say that not just this council, but a lot of councils shoot themselves in the foot a lot of times. And it's a lot of politics and, like we mentioned before, bureaucratic, red tape that seems to hinder progress. I think one of the things that the council, in their defense, because I've seen it, is just educating them on really the real pros and cons of a business development like that. And I think maybe back when wind energy was an initiative, it may not have been something that the council had on their radar because we were still so dependent and still making money on the coal and everything else. That's changing. I mean, you know that too. And eventually, here very quickly, that coal revenue and those royalties off that are not going to be there anymore. So now I think we're in a position, had the council been more foresighted, if you will, we could have already developed that renewable energy source. Now I think they're going to be forced into that position. We kind of waited too long and we don't have a choice here.
Yeah, and I notice we're getting into solar energy as well. That's pretty powerful.
Right.
So, quick question. This is, so whenever I was, when I went through council to get my appointment, right, Dr. What's his name? Dr. Lorenzo Begay and they really put us down. How can we get over that? How do we avoid, like we look in the past and they told us to get educated, right? Our elders. But then now that we're educated and people are coming back, we are being criticized for getting educated, right? You're not valuing your history or your culture. How do you think we can get over that?
Well, man, I think you're absolutely right, man, and I think it's something that, again, I think it's a generational thing that eventually, again, guys like yourself and this younger, talented, educated force that's coming up behind us is really going to be the ones that are going to be taking over these council seats and those educated. And I'm not saying the council's uneducated. I'm just saying that there's going to be this forward thinking generation coming up. I think again that's something that the government of any tribe needs to embrace, because I'm someone who sees it, and someone like you and like me, I'm trying to hire these people, and I'm competing with RADW, Moss Adams to hire these Navajos coming out of school, or any natives, and I can see this talent coming out, man, and that's something that the tribe has to consider and has to cultivate, because it's there, it's out there, and getting grilled at the council, and I know what that's all about, and it's just something that. But at the end of the day, man, they made the right decision, and they appointed guys like put you on the board. I think that was obviously a great decision. people who really can understand that business. And I think that in the past, that's been, and I think the movements that they've been making lately, for example, with the NHA board, and I'm not saying anything bad about the prior NHA board, but I think putting professional credentials on some of these boards is a good thing. I do believe that's maybe at some point in the past, these board positions were abused. And it's unfortunate, man, because I think the reason why people like you who and myself that, are professional, we're educated, we have the best interests of our people at heart, but we get such a hard time at the council of getting appointed is they've lost so much trust in these enterprises because of prior dealings, and going out and trying to regain. I think like for example, the NHA, the biggest challenge we're fighting is just getting the people's trust back. I mean, we could cure cancer right now, and I think people would be like, "Well, what is NHA?" It's just there's just so much mistrust of some of these enterprises just because of past dealings that people like you and myself and others that just want to go in and help their people and do the best that they can for them and apply their education and experience. A lot of those are coming up now, and that needs to be embraced and cultivated because I think that's going to be the key to regaining the trust that's been lost.
That's awesome and powerful. So is there anything else you would like to share? I went through all my questions, so.
No, man, I just really appreciate it. And, I do think, there's a lot of collaboration that natives, we as Navajos can do together. And, certainly anything I can do to help you. And since we're both accountants, obviously, and in other areas, just let me know. I really believe in, I'm not a guy who plays politics either. People will say, oh, well, a lot of people like to pin people to certain things or whatever. And for me, man, I'm just one of those guys who wants to go out and do what they can and help the people and really try and help. And so, thank you for this opportunity to be on here, and anything I can do for you moving forward, just let me know. I'd be happy to help you.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you taking time. I think podcast is heard by, I think it was over 300 people when I looked at the analytics in 121 countries. So there are a lot of, in fact, my episodes that get a lot of downloads and a lot of listens are like native people talking about their business, whether they're, the entrepreneurs, the jewelers, the silversmiths, the shoemakers, things like that. Because I think people want to know how to get going, and they're afraid to start. And I think that's why those are really successful. But again, I appreciate you taking time. I know you're a busy guy, and you just got that appointment, and that's a really exciting thing. Someone from I guess my generation that's making a difference for our people. That's powerful, and keep up the work, and hopefully I'll be seeing you at one of the meetings in the future. So.
Absolutely, brother. When we do, let's grab a bite to eat and talk more.
Okay, absolutely. Well, we're all set, man. And if you could send me a picture you want on the back of the podcast, that'd be great.
Okay.
Okay. All right. We'll talk to you later. Okay.
All right.
All right. Bye. Hello, everyone. Thank you for listening to this podcast. I really appreciate all the support that you all give me and continue to listen to this podcast. I hope you enjoy the future episodes. Please comment on Facebook at 21st Century Native Leaders or on Instagram, Navajo Podcaster.